Welcome back to Apocalypse Now. This is Joey Hornbuckle.
Apocalypse Now.
Bridgman Bolger.
Scott Brown and
Brian Baisden.
All right, so we are talking about the First Amendment and the Occupy movement. Sort of. And whatever else that leads us into. And you just heard Imagine by A Perfect Circle. It's not the John Lennon version. That is the song that we were playing in the park. We were sitting in a circle playing in the park when 200 police, helicopters, motorcycles, horse units showed up to arrest us. We're playing that song, Three Little Birds by Bob Marley, and an Occupy version of the Lion King theme song. So we were an obvious threat to the homeland.
That's right, singing that Kumbaya.
Yeah, all that. But all right, I just want to mention a few other things I saw in the FBI documents when I was reading them over, the ones that were released on the Occupy movement last week. One, in Alabama, hazmat teams were alerted by the FBI. I'm not really sure why. It just said concerning the Occupy Wall Street movement. I'm not sure what hazmat had to do with that, but they were notified. But also, another symptom of plutocracy, the FBI was working, they have bank fraud working groups, which are local groups of law enforcement, regulatory agency representatives, and financial industry representatives, of course. And the FBI went to meetings with them about the Occupy movement. And this was all these documents pertain to the first 2 months of the movement, between October, and actually even before the movement. Some of the documents even go before.
And who's the bank fraud working group?
It's just different local groups. The only one that was in those documents was in Denver, but they're local groups. All kinds of law enforcement, basically FBI, banking people, and regulatory agents, SEC, different.
So they have banking people working to prevent bank fraud? Is that what's going on here?
Well, yeah.
Maybe
in name.
Maybe Occupy prompted them to have some productive meetings and to clamp down on bank fraud.
Get realistic, that. Brian. Yeah,
I doubt that.
I think they were meeting about a lot of the things in the FBI documents were about possible cyber attacks, and they talked a lot about Anonymous supporting Occupy movement and a few other groups too that supported it. And they also talked about CEOs of Goldman Sachs and Chase being doxxed, which means they Anonymous released public information on some of the CEOs online.
Well, I'll also tell you this. In the federal government has to compete amongst itself to Congress, for Congress's attention, to justify its own budget year by year. Different agencies use different strategies to get money and keep their funding. Sometimes terrorism is well funded, anti-terrorism activities. If you can justify more of your activities as falling within that
Objection, Your Honor. How is this relevant?
Because all I'm saying is it could be bored bureaucrats trying to justify their jobs.
So here's a question I want to ask about the First Amendment that's relevant. For the First Amendment, one of the things that's a part of it is this whole thing about freedom of the media. But the First Amendment doesn't actually say freedom of the media. It says freedom of the press specifically. Right. So that one medium is protected. There's nothing you can do to regulate the press as the government. And the Supreme Court has interpreted it as such. Well, no, that's the thing, is that any other form of media, the government does regulate. It regulates the radio, it regulates television. To some extent, it regulates the internet, it regulates magazines. But it's not allowed to regulate the press.
Consolidate.
Yeah, does the government regulate industry? Or does industry regulate the government?
No, but it's an interesting point to note because things like, for instance, you cannot advertise cigarettes anywhere except in newspapers, because their newspapers are protected to do whatever they want. So it's the only true free form of media. And there's some people that think that's a bad thing, that think that we ought to have the other forms of media also completely unregulated. And there's other people who think that it's a good thing that we, to some extent, have regulated television and regulated radio.
I mean, it's okay to regulate it at an extent as long as everybody has an opportunity to express what they want in some form in that medium. So that's saying that on one station, you can use profaning language and show nudity, and if you want to capture that message, there's a place for you to go get that. But on another channel, it's prohibited. So it's it's the freedom to view that type of entertainment is out there for you, but it's regulated to a few places. You see what I'm saying?
No.
I'm saying that, okay.
Wouldn't the channel with the nudity and the cuss words, wouldn't that be available to everybody? So like kids could tune into that and learn some new words and
yes, but you can but
learn how to cock a pistol and
The word
shoot
of the day
people.
is enema.
Yeah, yes, this true enough, but it's at a certain place, and if you don't want that to be shared with you and your family, you don't have to go to that place. It's not out there for everybody to see on every single station.
And also, I think things even...
So like Sirius Radio,
Yeah,
Sirius XM, is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, because you can say whatever you want on there. And
that is true.
It's a medium. It's free. You can basically say whatever you want and talk about anything.
So you think the government should regulate the media to an extent?
I mean, I'm not saying the media, yes, but not the press. I agree with the way it's written in the Constitution in the First Amendment.
Okay.
Because the press is supposed to provide information to the people, and sometimes the information is gaudy and not glorifying, and you can't censor the media for showing you the truth. You know what I'm saying? And the truth is not always pretty.
But that's what they do. They currently do censor themselves to obfuscate or to hide the truth. We don't see images of the dead in Afghanistan or Pakistan.
Yeah,
or Iraq.
They're doing it to themselves, though. They're doing it to themselves. There's no
sure, but I guess my idea is that freedom of the press may be a bad thing, because it can be argued that freedom of the press means that the government should not have any regulations over the press. And if the press is bought by the Koch brothers or George Soros, and all we hear is Koch or Soros perspectives, then that's what the press is, because that's what's been bought, right? So I don't agree with that perspective.
The government does regulate them, though. I mean, there's laws against monopoly, but also some of those are being challenged, like how you can't own different mediums in more than one metro area. They're challenging that.
Right, because they can regulate
Rupert
those
Murdoch
forms of media, but the government has never stepped in and said you can't buy this newspaper company.
That's an interesting...
No, they are. That's what they're changing right now.
That's an interesting claim. I'll have to do research on that, Joey.
No, there's currently a bill going through Congress, the federal level, that will let basically Rupert Murdoch wants to buy all the newspapers in LA, or at least buy another one, but you can't own... Mm-hmm. I don't know exactly what it is. I'll look it up. You guys keep talking about this.
Yeah, I'm skeptical whether your claim is true, Joey, too. But I wanted to talk about a specific Supreme Court case. And I think it was 2007. It's called Morse versus Frederick. But just Google bong hits for Jesus, and that'll get you right there. An 18-year-old high school student decided to step across the street from his high school and with his buddies hang up a banner that said "Bong hits for Jesus." It faced the school, faced the students, and although he was off property, the Supreme Court found that it was a school activity because they had received permission from the school to go out to watch, I think it was 2002, a torch from the Olympics go by their school. So the principal went over immediately and tore down the sign, confiscated it, and suspended the students. One of the students sued, and it went up eventually to the Supreme Court. And the dissenting justices pointed out that, it's a bit arbitrary. Well, what if he had said alcohol? And also, it's quite an oblique reference in the words of one justice. Bong hits for Jesus. One could argue that, well, Jesus is dead, therefore it is not a real argument. It's not advocating illegal drug use. That was the whole justification by the justices, was that it advocated illegal drug use. But my problem with this ruling is that what is an illegal drug is an arbitrary decision, and I can find scientific literature that backs up this point. So for the Supreme Court to say students have to be controlled as if they are under a police state, that they can't make quirky, clever, creative comments about illegal drugs when illegality is arbitrary. I don't know how the DEA decides it, but I'm sure it's retarded. It's just wrong-headed in my opinion, and it just shows the importance that I don't want a Republican elected in 2016 because I'm scared of where the Supreme Court might go.
I understand that, but when you go to school, when we're students and we go to school, all our constitutional rights are gone, and we adhere to another set of rules and standards given to us by the Board of Education and by the county school board. And, you know, for instance, you can't bring a gun into a school. That's your Second Amendment right is gone. You can't disagree with the teacher to where it disrupts the class. That's your First Amendment right gone. You know, they have the right to search anything on you at any time. That's your Fourth Amendment right. So, and you sign a piece of paper, or at least I did when I was in school, at the beginning of the year, there's a student rights and responsibility handbook that saying you're waiving these rights, and when you receive this free taxpayer-funded education from the state, you are waiving these rights while the time you are at this school. But I mean, I will say sometimes it does, you know, get too intrusive when they try to say when you leave the school and you have to abide by these rules up until the time you enter your household. I mean, that does seem kind of intrusive, but as you sign these things and agree to this as a child, and your parents sign it, you're supposed to take the paperwork home, and your parents are supposed to sign it because you can't enter into a contract with the minor anyway. But it seems like the people you're talking about were 18 years old.
Yes.
So being that they were 18 years old and they stepped outside of school, it depends on the way the school board is set up and exactly what they were expressing with the sign. If it was disrupting the student body, then maybe I could see grounds for, you know, the sign being removed and there being disciplinary action.
When did we get these rights? When did we get the right to hang up a banner on a building that says Jesus, something about Jesus and bong hits? We've never had the right to just go and arbitrarily do that. We have the right to have an opinion,
American citizens,
and to go out and give that opinion. But that doesn't mean that we can
bong hits for Jesus, and so do you, Joey.
No, we don't. We don't have the right to do it by any medium that we want. If it's not our property to go out and put that sign up, if that's not in our jurisdiction,
public space.
Yeah, which means that it's under the jurisdiction of the county government, and more specifically the Board of Education. So that's not under our jurisdiction. We're not the people that are in control of the rules to go out there and hang up signs wherever we want, or to paint graffiti wherever we want, and then say that that's free speech. We can have an opinion, but that doesn't mean that we can give that opinion through whatever medium that we want. We can't go in a quiet neighborhood in the middle of the night and start yelling on a loudspeaker what our opinions are. We can't write graffiti all over the courthouse building in order to deliver our opinions and let everybody know what we think. That's not what the First Amendment protects. It protects the ability for us to have opinions and to express those opinions, but not to express those opinions in any medium that we want. Otherwise, we would be in chaos.
I appreciate your arguments.
I appreciate your opinion, Joey.
But I do think you're a little bit, and it's fine, playing devil's advocate. And I know you're a supporter of decriminalization or legalization for marijuana, and a certain part of your brain or heart has to hurt for this kid getting suspended and then having the Supreme Court say it's okay, even though justices pointed out the arbitrariness of our drug policy.
Let me tell you something that happened to me when I was in high school. I went to school with a Bob Marley shirt on, and Bob Marley didn't have no weed in his mouth or anything. It was just Bob Marley. And they told me I couldn't wear that shirt anymore because Bob Marley represents marijuana.
Yeah, I think that's bogus.
Yeah,
that's
I do too. But being that I'm receiving taxpayer funded education, I have.
Yo, my First Amendment rights were trampled the whole time I was in school. I couldn't say shit. I couldn't wear shit. I got,
I mean,
I'd get dragged out of class. Like I'd tell there'd be recruiters in our cafeteria. I'd get suspended for cursing them out.
And do these rights extend to minors? Is the
Hell
question?
no, they don't.
Yeah.
Hell no, they don't.
Yeah.
Not in this country, at least. Minors don't
I
have
think
rights.
you guys are
Like,
misinterpreting your rights.
I just don't believe that children should grow up because parents can't afford a private school or can't afford to homeschool them. I just don't believe children should be forced to grow up in a police state environment. And that's effectively what a public school is. It's a bureaucratic nightmare. My mother retired when she retired because it was a bureaucratic nightmare. And kids shouldn't do this.
You ever notice how they look exactly like jails?
Yeah.
Look at the architecture of prison and a school.
Yeah, it's like they got the same architects to go in there and build it.
But anyway, back to
Same
all right.
engineers.
I found a Chicago Tribune. This is actually a story in the Chicago Tribune. All right, I guess there's not a bill in Congress, but the FCC is trying to. I'm not sure if this has actually gone through yet. This is a couple weeks old, but the FCC wants to suspend rules so Rupert Murdoch can buy the Chicago Tribune and the LA Times. So I'm guessing it happened. I'm not too sure.
I don't think Rupert Murdoch should be allowed to buy anything in this country anymore. He owns enough.
Just pass a law to target him. Right?
Yeah, just him.
The FCC is trying to give him waivers, so I mean, basically, yeah, the
So
government does have regulation
The
over media.
FCC does regulate for the press how they can buy each other out, but it still can't regulate what they say.
I mean, it can to a degree. You can't drop an F-bomb on prime
No,
time.
you can drop
You
the
can?
F-bomb
So good.
in a
So
newspaper.
good.
In the news,
Well, in a
you can.
newspaper.
On the
Yeah,
news.
but not on CNN.
Yeah.
No, it's regulated.
But
And
I
the
think it's a pretty
Supreme Court-
arbitrary difference. I mean, if a kid can read, he can read an F-bomb. He can he look at a picture of porn in a newspaper, but he can't
So-
watch it on TV?
But
That's
So
sometimes,
do you
but maybe
disagree
there's a
with-
child who can't read. And he can't, you know what I'm saying? There's a 4-year-old
His
and
first
he
words.
can't read, and he hears that word on the news, and it's like, "Mommy, what's that?" And he goes back to school or daycare and repeats it. You know,
So,
I mean,
so I just want to get this straight. So Scott, you disagree with the notion that the press is the one form of media that the government cannot regulate. You think all forms of media should be unregulated, that they should all be as free as the press are allowed to be.
No, but I mean, we're in a weird position where since I'll always claim that we live in a plutocracy. Any regulation that the government does is pretty much industry approved. Like, you can't tell if the government wrote it or if it's what the industry wants. So there's no and its enforcement is also. I mean, look at any enforcement agency. It's always staffed by people who come and headed by people who come from the same industry it's regulating. You know, whether it's FDA. The new FDA
Financial
came from
sector,
Monsanto,
yeah.
the financial sector,
Sector,
dude.
right.
The Treasury Department looks like Goldman
sex,
Sachs.
right?
Like
Government sex. Yeah.
government, wherever
Yeah.
wherever you go, it's always the same, and that's the nature of plutocracy. And so
Yeah.
talking about it's hard. That's
Karzai
why
was an auto executive. You know,
it's so hard to talk
Yeah.
about regulation in this country, and realistically, and like it's just because it's our government. There needs to be a goddamn firewall between money, corporations, and the government, and especially the revolving door that needs to be boarded up, shut, nailed, fucking super glued.
Well, yes,
Whatever.
but since the history, as soon as there were a democratic process, all the way back to Greece, there has been money in politics. And
Yeah.
it was called bribes then, but
Bribery used to be legal.
Yeah.
Up until around the Civil
Yeah.
War, it was lobbyists would walk into the White House with a bag of money, throw it in the safe, and then go talk to people. You know, you go talk to your representative after you just throw a bag of money in a safe. But that was totally legal. And then they made blatant bribery illegal and quid pro quo supposedly illegal, even though it's so obvious that a lot of Duke Cunningham went to jail for it, but he went to jail because he wrote it down. Because they caught him writing it down. Like, as long as nobody else leaves a paper trail.
Blagojevich,
And then William Jefferson, didn't he have money in a freezer?
the congressman from North Louisiana.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and it's both sides. He was a Democrat.
Yep.
It's everywhere.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, people want to act like Democrats aren't bought off. Like, that's bullshit.
But
For the revolving door, though, don't you think that's a problem that's hard to get rid of? Because a lot of the people who would be best to serve in government are the experts who right now have private industry jobs. Joseph Kennedy, who started up the SEC, or Ratner, who was a Wall Street executive who came in and designed the bailouts that succeeded in saving General Motors and Chrysler. Like there's a lot of people who do good work in the private sector, and then because they're the best experts, they're brought in to the government, and then they wind up doing a really good job at government. So
I agree. You don't want to throw
is
the
the
baby out with the
revolving door
bathwater.
always a bad thing, or
There's
is it
gotta-
just bad in cases like Monsanto, where somebody's working for that company and then they decide to go and work for the
That's
agriculture
it, yeah.
department, where they're supposed to be regulating the company they were just at?
And then so then they can get all this money through regulation for Monsanto and then go back to Monsanto and make a bunch of money to
And
get
still-
paid
and they're
back for
still
what they
like,
did as the
they're
government.
still on the advisory committee or something. you know.
And even more sticky, what about people who actually do it the opposite? They start out in government, and then they
Yeah.
do a lot of
As
nice,
soon as they
sweet
get out,
things
they-
for the private
they go right
industry,
back.
and say,
And
and
they
you
go-
know, they give some winks
And that's the
some
thing, you know,
nods.
46% of, I think it's around 46% of congressmen will go, as soon as they get out of Congress, they're going to go work for a lobbying firm.
Right.
And they know they're going to get, 6-7 figure income working for that lobbying firm. So, what are you going to do when you're making laws and, you got this lobbyist in there saying, hey, we got this nice job. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that Jack Abramoff says in his interviews. He's like, this is what would just bend a politician over, dude.
Well, we kind of
make
create
them
a
your bitch.
situation where we just breed corruption, like especially we look at our state, Georgia. Our politicians, as far as state representatives and state senators, they make no money. So it's almost.
Well, they also only work 4 months a year.
They have but still.
I mean, think about it. They make about $20,000 working 4 months a year. So
They
that's
make
like
$7,000.
$7,000. For state
per diem.
representatives?
Well, plus
It's
per
per
diem,
diem, yeah.
so it can add up to 20,000.
Yeah.
I thought it was 19,000.
Well, it's 7.
I thought it was more than 7, but
Alright,
you
like-
also get paid.
Well, I
per
know
diem.
state representative is like 7. For a state representative in Georgia, it's 7. Unless they increased the last legislative session, it was 7,000. So
I
it's
saw the Atlanta Council gave themselves quite a pretty big income boost.
Yeah, I saw that too.
so it's almost like you almost have to be working for somebody else. You see what I'm saying? In that aspect, and then when in the case of Congress, you have a bunch of millionaires who are now making $100 and something thousand.
And then
Yeah, it's
have y'all seen the data? How if you're in the Senate or if you're in Congress, you trade a lot better than like the market average, and you outperform.
Inside
a lot
I
of
trading.
these
wonder
people.
why.
Yeah,
seen
inside
that.
trading is legal for Congress.
I
Yep.
don't know why.
But
Yeah,
no,
you got all that inside information. You know when
Yeah.
to buy and sell.
And then how can you really blame them? Like you're supposed to ignore the facts that you know that you're privy to.
But there
Yeah.
should be
That's why
a rule
pass a
that,
law.
that bans that. I mean, that's just as corrupt as it gets.
Yeah, they tried
but
to
then
get
they
something
won't,
through. I don't know what happened.
They almost got it through, and then Mitch McConnell said, "No, we're not doing this."
Well, you know,
And so they watered the bill
Republicans,
down, and then it became a pointless bill. The point of the bill was to keep congressmen and senators from doing insider trading and from trading their own stocks based on information they're finding out.
But how do you do that when you own stock and you have this information?
put
You
it
just
in-
ignore it.
Put it in a blind trust. Do what
Yeah,
Mitt Romney did,
blind
with all due
trust.
respect. Put it in a blind trust. Have somebody else manage your money so that there's no conflict of interest.
all right, everywhere I'm seeing is saying they get about 17,000 a year, but also none of these are very reliable
That
sources. I'm gonna ask
17,000
Senator
a
Fort.
year.
I'm gonna ask Senator Fort next time we go to trial.
17,000 a year is what I thought it
Who
was.
pays his bills?
I'm gonna ask him.
They have they also have
It's a
a
good
I got
budget.
his number.
They have a budget too. So it's like at the end of the year, whatever they don't use for the budget, I mean, they get to use
Well,
it for
I think
other
our time
things.
is coming to a close. I would like to make my concluding remarks. My concluding remarks are that the First Amendment, freedom of the press, could potentially be our downfall because it blinds us to the truth and it keeps our ears full of corporate media. And what the First Amendment really means is that we have to have free access to diverse opinions, and we're not getting that through mainstream media right now. And we need to amend the Constitution if necessary.
So my closing remarks are that I actually think that the press is extremely useful, and there's a lot of important newspapers that are published by a completely independent company that gets its money through selling revenue, through selling newspapers. Newspapers like Washington Post and New York Times, among others. So I think the press is vital. But what actually concerns me is that the press is really struggling right now because people are not buying newspapers and instead buying basically reading things on the internet, which is a lot less lucrative. So my biggest concern is that the press is increasingly not getting the funding it used to get in the past. And if the press doesn't have the funding to do the kind of investigative journalism that it has done in the past, the unregulated, free journalism that's done in the past, then who's going to do it in the future?
Yeah.
I think that's why we're seeing a lot of documentaries coming up with information that you won't find, and 'cause you can make more money in a documentary than you can make in a newspaper article.
Right.
I mean, like Gasland. How many stories do you see about fracking? Even though it's happening all over the country, it's decimating communities all from east to west, Pennsylvania to Colorado. I mean, all over. But you don't hear about it on the news. You barely hear about it anywhere. But a movie like Gasland can. A lot of people. You guys seen it, right? You guys haven't seen Gasland.
I've heard about it.
I've seen
skimmed through, but
I've heard
I haven't
about
seen
it.
the whole thing.
I mean,
you guys.
I used to be on an email list for an environmental health organization, and I would constantly see it in my inbox because they would scan the media, and anytime it was on any media anywhere, it would be on that list of media that usually about 20, 30 stories a day. And it was common for me to see that, so I kind of felt like that was going to be an issue to bloom and develop, and it did. But yeah, unless you have eagle eyes, unless your radar's constantly scanning, yeah, you're going to totally miss the important things.
Exactly. That's why you got to tune in to Plutocracy now. We'll catch them.
All right. In my closing statement, I will say that the First Amendment is unique in all of history because it was a turning point for all humanity because it finally gave the common man to speak out against the elites. And prior to that, there was no place on this planet where you could do that and still have your head and know that you could still comfortably live a prosperous life. And the idea of a free press was meant to be just that, a free press, meaning not for profit. And the profit incentive that comes into our media is what is destroying our information gathering resources. And that's why so many people are turning to the internet, because there's no corporate filters there, but at the same time there's a lot of misinformation out there, so you gotta do your own research.
It's almost all misinformation. Shit, you get people believing that lizards are alien lizards controlling the world. People who seriously believe this shit.
I know people who believe it too, but you'd be surprised. I have a family that they really believe it. After 2012, I told them, after the 21st, I was like, so what the hell now? What you got to say now? The world didn't end, so all the other bullshit you were talking about is bullshit too, so give it up. You still got to pay your rent on the first.
I just want to point out one other thing that was in these FBI documents about Occupy. In L.A., they were talking about it. They repeatedly said, Brian, you were saying that there was a possibility of violence and some people wanted to hurt cops and build barriers, and however dumb that was, I don't think the FBI, they even said in their documents that it was a nonviolent movement and that there was just opportunists might take the opportunity of the mass movement to use violence. And here's also another thing that I didn't even mention that I'm guessing, I don't know if you guys heard about it.
Are these part of your concluding remarks? Just wondering.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
we're getting there.
Yeah,
but I know Bridgemont said he needed to leave by 1:30. It's 1:34. I'm just throwing that out there.
All right, calm down.
That's okay.
Plutocracy, battling plutocracy is a full-time job. Anyway, so in these documents about Houston, apparently they redacted so much of this particular document that you couldn't really tell what was going on. But it seemed like from what wasn't redacted that there was an organization or some kind of group of individuals you couldn't really tell, that was planning sniper attacks against people they thought were leaders in the Occupy movement in Houston. And so the FBI, there was one paragraph in like a 2 or 3 page document that wasn't redacted, and some of the words were, and so you couldn't tell who they were talking about. But there was some group that the FBI knew was planning sniper attacks on Occupy protesters. You never hear anything of that, but all you hear
I believe they're called the Tea Party.
But and they also they grouped in different documents. They group Occupy with Aryan Nation, like
Yeah.
What the hell? Since when was Occupy a hate group, man?
Yeah, they did.
It's like the complete opposite.
I know.
Any organization that believes that's a hate group or that's anti-government or maybe considered anarchist or opposes or wants revolution of any kind, the FBI watching them. These things called fusion centers, and there's
FBI. There was a lot about that in the documents.
Yeah,
fusion centers.
Yeah, it's one on Claremont.
But if a lot of people are claiming that they want revolution, isn't that a good reason to gather intelligence just to make sure that they're not actually...
Possibly, but there's a lot of different types of revolution. I mean, revolution
just you know, safety first.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing, but I mean, when people want to say that the possible violence of a nonviolent movement that states it's nonviolent, that the FBI repeatedly says Occupy is a nonviolent movement. They're always stating they're a nonviolent movement. Like they'll note
because they investigated them.
But it's such an open movement. You can't guarantee it's nonviolent.
They know that in general it's a nonviolent movement. They know that there's not going to be an Occupy.
Operate. I know in general Muslims are going to be peaceful, but does that mean I'm going to ignore the potential for them to fucking blow up?
Well, they did the same thing to the civil rights movement. That was the most nonviolent movement in all of history, and the FBI were monitoring them, tapping people's phones.
Yeah, murdering them, dude, Fred Hampton Jr.
Right, exactly.
No. Absolutely.
But and also, I mean,
let's put out the sins of history, but
here,
I'm just saying I don't see a historical sin today on the FBI for Occupy. That's all I'm saying.
All right, well, I'm gonna have to disagree with you on that. I mean, well, and for another thing, a lot of local police departments in the documents, they said that they had people who would go to the meetings and monitor them, so that they had informants in numerous cities, and they also had them in. Well, when we were in court, and our lawyers would ask Chief Moss if there were informants, he would say, "I wouldn't call them informants. I would call them sources of information." And he would say that about surveillance. Like our lawyer asked if there was 24-hour police surveillance of the park, and he would say, "I wouldn't call it surveillance. I would call it constant police watch." Just real.
Yeah. I would call it PR.
And
which is propaganda.
One thing I want to throw out, you know, when you're talking about, you know, reasons that the FBI had to be concerned about the Occupy movement. Here's one reason they were concerned about it. This is a quote from it. Blank. You know, a redacted word, is concerned about what may happen if the Occupy Wall Street protesters mixed with the more violent individuals upset about alleged mistreatment of prisoners in the Los Angeles Sheriff Department jails. Because apparently there were a lot of...
But you don't know who blank is. It could be a freaking... a pastor of some church. Like, you don't know.
Yeah, but it wasn't. I mean, I can give you the full context of the document, but I know you want to get out of here, so...
All right, my closing remark.
I told you to read these.
My closing remark. I rely on the press to some extent to pull out the relevant details. Democracy Now! Failed us in this part. But my closing remark is in response to what you said, Scott, and that is, I remember being there that night. Me, you, and 2 other people stayed late to discuss the goals of the Occupy movement and to try to draft something that the whole community could agree with. And one person in particular kept trying to bring us back to hate and how we needed to use hate in the movement. So I note a particular irony.
That was the informant.
I mean, I think we need to use anger, but I don't know if hate's gonna help, because hate implies. I think it's more of a systemic problem than individuals that really need it. So I don't think hate would help, but I definitely think we need anger. I think we need more public anger. There needs to be way more public outrage.
Indignation.
Righteous indignation. All right, this is Plutocracy Now!, the Class War and Peace Report.
Peace.
Peace out.
Leave
you with a little song. Let's hear Guillotine by The Coup.
Oh, good.
Peace out, everybody.
Song. This is good.
wanna thank you for flying with us. We know you could've stayed home, just cried and cussed. Mail your guns go off if it's time to bust. Mail they tanks have time to rust. They got the armies turning bullets into gold. They got the hookers turning tricks into cold. And every time the police kicks in the dough, an angel gas breaks dips in the O. And even if a D-boy flips in my O, it ain't enough to buy shit anymore. Sleep in the doorway, piss on the floor. Look in the sky, wait for missiles to show. It's finna blow, cause they got the TV, we got the truth. They own the judges and we got the proof. We got hella people, they got helicopters, they got the bombs, and we got the
guillotine. We got the guillotine, you better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine, you better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine, you better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine, you better run. Talk about it, I show. Be about it, I know. Talk about it, I show. Be about it, I know.
I just spit the dope lines, I don't snort them. Tell the boss to call police to escort them. You don't write out them lines, you just quote them. Get offline, plug into this modem. No, you can't outvote them, the rules are still golden. On the jewels we holdin' if we guardin' our scrotum. If you press the ear to the turf that is stolen, you can hear the sound of limitations exploding. Please, sir, may we have another portion with children of the beast that dodge the abortion. Neck placed firm between the floor and the portion. When shut your shit down, don't call it extortion. Caution, we're coming for your head. So call the feds and get files to shred. Every textbook read said bring you the bread, but guess what, we got you instead.
We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine.